Hello, everybody. Welcome to my lunchtime chat that is sponsored by Our Black Hair Matters. And today we are discussing 4 things that you need to know about Black hair care. Now, I was motivated to discuss this based on comments and questions that were asked by members of our Black Hair Matters movement group. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you are a member of the group. I do ask questions before you are authorized to join because I want to know a little bit of background about you and what you really want to know. So this is where I got the inspiration for what we're doing today. So I will be talking about how to combat dry hair, and I'll be talking about things that you should consider when transitioning to natural hair, how to care for your hair as you age, that was a big one, and then what is new in the hair care industry. And so for those of you who may not know me, let me take some time to just introduce myself. My name is Dr. Crystal Porter, and I am a hair scientist, and this is a live online broadcast platform that is dedicated to elevating the Black hair care industry and empowering consumers and hair professionals with education that is driven and backed by scientific research. So before I get started, I want to know who is all here. So make sure you put your name in and let me know where you're from. Also, let me know if you are a hair practitioner, put the number 1 in. If you are a consumer, let me know by putting the number 2. And if you are a researcher or a scientist like myself, please put in the number 3. And then also please share this broadcast. If you know 5 people who would be able to benefit from what it is we're discussing today, be sure to share. And so this platform really is for anyone who is frustrated with the lack of information that is available when it comes to caring for your hair, or you've wasted a lot of money, time, and resources on your own, just trying to figure things out. So if you said that is something that resonates with you, then you are definitely in the right place. And one last thing is I have put together a valuable resource, which is 3 biggest mistakes to avoid when caring for your curly hair. So if you would like to have that, go to bit.ly/OBHM consult, and that will pop up momentarily, and then you can get your free resource. Awesome. All right. So we have Taria, thanks for joining. Nadia, thanks for joining. You said great topics, thank you. We have Andrea, thank you for coming. And all right, I see more of you who are out there, but thanks for those who have already introduced yourself. All right, so we are going to jump right into it. And so I wanted to really talk about dryness because a lot of people are concerned about dryness, and I understand. I am one of those people who really care about it as well. And so first of all, I want to start off by defining exactly what dryness is. And dryness is the lack of water, or, you can also say the absence of water. And you have to keep in mind that it's actually, pretty a wide range of what the absence of water can be, because you could be down 10%, you can be down 100%. So dryness is really relative, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because a lot of people have these descriptors such as moisturization or hydration and differences between the two. So I want to just make it clear for what I understand it to be, and for the definition for today, we are going to say water content, moisturization, and hydration are all the same. So all on equal footing. So I'm not going to differentiate between, what it could or could not mean. It means water content for the purposes of what we'll be discussing here. And Alicia, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. And so now that we have the definition, I want to also talk about what is believed when we talk about dryness. So a lot of times when you describe dryness, it is based on what you see and what you feel relative to what your hair is going through, or what you put on it, or what you see in terms of, how it could be looking dull, or if it could be what is considered looking dry. which, usually has to do with the amount of shine, right? So if you have high shine, it looks hydrated. But if it starts to look a little dull, or if it looks a little, waxy, some people will say, okay, my hair looks dry. Also, when it comes to feeling, when you look at it from a scientific standpoint, it really is a lack of it being pliable, or a lack of it being supple. And so I just want to make sure that you understand the lingo. When it comes to scientific lingo, it has to do with containing water or lack thereof. And then what consumers mean a lot of times when they say your hair is dry is based on how it looks and how it feels. And so good afternoon. I see someone, or maybe a couple of people have Facebook user that I can see. So if you allow StreamYard to actually recognize who you are, if you give it permission, then I can actually see your name. So thanks to those of you who have definitely approved that. Okay, you said that's one huge one for me, dry hair and scalp. Oh yeah, I do understand having dry hair and scalp. And so dry scalp is a whole nother issue that I'll talk about a little bit later. I'll hit on it a little bit later, but dry scalp is a big issue as well. And then make sure I've addressed everyone. It seems as though I've done. Okay, great. So want to talk about, why your hair will look or feel dry. Because after we cleanse our hair, right, your hair is wet, it's supple. From a scientific standpoint, it becomes plasticized, which is a terminology that we use that basically means that it's a lot more mobile, right? So it moves a little bit. There's something called like a bending modulus. And so when that bending modulus is decreased, it means that it's more flexible. And so we want to keep, a bending modulus that is low, meaning that it's not going to take a lot of force to bend it, right? When you have a high modulus, that means it's more stiff. So we want to keep that bending modulus low and keep it more supple and pliable. And so when your hair is first, wet and it feels, all soft and pliable, it has a lot of water content. And so that's why people associate the amount of water in hair with it feeling dry. Because as our hair dries, meaning removal of water from the hair shaft, that means that it is becoming a little bit more stiff. And that is something that happens with materials. And our hair is a biomaterial. So that is something that is really important to us in terms of, how good we feel that our hair is being in terms of its condition. And so as the water content is evaporating from our hair, and then that modulus is actually increasing, meaning the stiffness increases, then we're like, oh my God, my hair is drying. So how can I keep that moisture in? And so one of the things that you need to know is, as long as your hair, the content of the water in your hair is different than the environment, that means when you're outside, when you're inside in air conditioning, the relative humidity, it considers the amount of moisture that's in the air. So when there is a difference between the relative humidity in your hair and the relative humidity in the environment, there's going to be a shift. And the shift can be both ways. So if you have high water content in your hair, but the relative humidity in your environment is low, then your hair is going to want to equilibrate. That means it wants to go into equilibrium with the environment. So then you're going to have water removal from your hair going out into the environment because the relative humidity is lower in the environment. And so it's trying to equilibrate and become the same with the environment. So that's why we have the battle with dryness and water content actually being removed from the hair. And so that's something that's going to happen. So the only way we can really overcome that is to actually put products or have different films or protect it in a way so that we keep it, that rate of change slower. because it's going to happen. Unfortunately, the best ingredients or products that will hold the water in means that it won't be washed out of your hair. So if it's going to actually repel water so much, that means that it will stick to your hair and not even be able to be washed away. And that is something that you definitely don't want. I want to make sure. Oh, I thought I saw another comment. Okay. Thank you, Michelle Porter, for coming. Thanks, Roberta. And good morning to you too. All right. So we established what is defined as. We've established what it is that consumers mean when they say the hair is dry. And so I told you about what actually happens, right? And so we talked about moisture being high in the hair, but low in the environment. So it wants the water to go out. And then the rate in which it goes out is based on the condition of your hair, and it's based on what products you use on the hair. So the only way to reduce it is to have a film former on your hair so that it will leave out at a slower rate. So it doesn't mean that you're going to not have it actually exit the hair shaft, because that's going to happen. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your hair is going to lose its moisture content, right? So we need to know how to combat that, right? And so one way of doing it is to consider that when your hair is damaged, it's going to lose water at a faster rate. And that's just related to the morphology or the structure of the hair. And so when you have hair in its, I'll say, undamaged state, then you're going to have a cuticle that is intact, meaning that it hasn't been abraded away from the manipulation that you have, and it hasn't been abraded or compromised due to a lot of treatments. And so the perfect hair fiber has an even cuticle around the entire fiber, right? Around the diameter. But the other thing that you have to consider is the loss of lipids. And lipids are like fatty type compositions that exist on the surface of our hair. And a lot of times we can remove the lipids by what we do to it day in and day out. So grooming, treatments, of course, using harsh surfactants or cleansing agents, all of that can remove a lot of the natural lipids that are on the hair surface. And so that's one of the reasons why we use a lot of products to try to I want to say compensate for the loss of lipids. I thought I saw another comment. No other comments. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about things that will lead to the loss of lipids or to that dry sensation, whether you see it or you feel it. So, of course, if you use, I'll say, poorly made products. And what I mean by that is sometimes there are products that are effective for the function that they are made for, like a spritz. You use a spritz because you want your hair to, stay styled or look a particular way. But sometimes they're made with volatile alcohols. And when I say volatile alcohols, these are the types of alcohols that are similar, it's a solvent. So it holds all the ingredients together in the formulation. However, sometimes you have drying alcohols. And so those are typical of what you would think of when you go to your medicine cabinet and you have rubbing alcohol. So those are the ones that evaporate and they can dry the hair out. However, there have been advancements in technologies where you don't necessarily have to have that drying sensation due to alcohol. They use other solvents instead that are less drying. But if it's poorly made, sometimes in spritzes, sometimes in hairsprays, and also in gels, you can have these drying alcohols, right? So you definitely want to be aware of that. Say, what about eating more EFAs? Okay, many women with dry and damaged hair have an essential fatty acid deficiency. Okay, wow. So I haven't done any studies on the essential fatty acids in hair and how it relates to diet. So that's a good question. There is a lack of research, and we'll talk about that a little later, but there's a lack of research when it comes to all of the different variables that can play a role in the health of our hair. And usually, yeah, we haven't done any experiments. So we can do what's called amino acid analysis, but a lot of times the structure of the hair is intact or our instrumentation isn't sensitive enough to be able to detect that. But we discussed this last week when we were talking about the gut, brain, and skin axis, right? So a lot of the different bodily functions, like they are all related and they affect one another, right? So that is something that we need to study a little bit more about. Great question. Yeah, that was a great question. So you said that was Lisa? Okay. So if you, so sometimes I see Facebook user, so I can't even say your name. So thank you, Taria, for seeing that that was Lisa who made that comment. But if you can give permissions, then I can actually see your name. So StreamYard asked for permission. So I would be able to look at who is making a comment. All right. So we talked about the different types of products, but then lifestyle can also play a role in terms of what contributes to hair dryness. So if you swim, for example, I've had a number of people who are like, oh, what should I use? And so it's really tough because in order to remove a lot of the chlorine that goes into the hair from swimming in a chlorinated pool, a lot of times you just have to rinse with copious amounts of water. And what people want to do is like have a shampoo to remove the chlorine. And sometimes you want like a chelating agent or some type of an agent that will bind to the chlorine that's in the water and have it go outside of the hair. But what we've shown as scientists is with a lot of different things that can go into the hair, in order to get it out, just thorough rinsing. But to be honest with you, the amount of water that it takes to remove a lot of the chlorine and other types of products that really like to stay inside of the hair strand, you have to like soak it for like over an hour in water. And it's ridiculous, but that's a technique that we use in the laboratory because we can do it under a controlled environment, and you know, it's like a little small piece of hair relative to the amount that you have on your entire head. So that is something that we do in the laboratory, and it's called dialysis. We actually just expose the hair to dialysis, which is put it in a big old beaker of water and just let it sit, and then everything can leach out. Do you do any research on saltwater effects? You know, there isn't a lot of information about it, but the good thing about salt water is it's not as hard, meaning hard water versus soft water. So it doesn't have like the amount of minerals, and so it doesn't dry it out as much. But the great thing about salt is that it is it dilutes in water, you know, so you don't have to worry about that really staying in the hair long term. So there really isn't a lot of research, but just thinking about it from a chemistry standpoint, you don't have to worry about salt as much because it readily goes away with water. Well, unsalted water, that is. All right. And so the other thing that will lead to hair dryness, and I kind of talked about this earlier, and that is, you know, too much manipulation. So oftentimes we think about combing and brushing, right? But you also have to consider something that my children do from time to time, and I have to tell them to stop it. And that is just sitting in their hair and just twisting it and twirling. And I'm like, stop that, get out of your hair. Because what you're doing is abrading the cuticle, which is the protective layer of your hair strands. So you want to make sure that you avoid just messing with your hair unintentionally is usually what happens. But you want to make sure that you do not have a lot of manipulation. Now, the other thing that will lead to hair dryness is, something that I do from time to time now, and that is thermal processing. So if you add heat, whether it be a blow dryer or if it's a flat iron or curling iron, having heat on your hair is also a form of drying it out, not in the sense that not only does it remove the moisture, but it also abrades the cuticle. And so when we talk about hair damage, which is also considered drying out the hair from a consumer standpoint, that is something that you need to be aware of. So, keeping it at the lowest setting that is possible to get the thermal straightening that you need is advantageous. Also using heat protection products. And a lot of times people say, oh, I hate silicones, no cones, but I love them. And I love the heat protection properties as well. Speaking of silicones, that is another product that you can use to help to keep the moisture in the hair strand. So that is an ingredient in products that are very effective. And so we say, someone says, and I apologize, I can't see your name. I encourage my friend to get a salt pool, a salt water pool for better health. Yeah, you know what? I can't even imagine the upkeep of that. I'm sure that there are some other things to consider, and I am no expert with that. But wow, a saltwater pool, yeah. Not sure about, the microorganisms and, trying to keep the pH where it needs to be in order for it to indeed be healthy. But that is a consideration. And then Taria says, that's me all day, playing and twisting. Yeah. Twisting in your hair is just not conducive to keeping your hair healthy and not having what is perceived as that dry feeling, right? All right, so the other thing that is really popular now, but a lot of people don't really understand the correlation to dryness and this particular technique, and that is sponging. A lot of people are sponging their hair, and I should have an example. Basically, you use a sponge. I'm gonna grab my phone just because it kind of reminds me of a sponge, and you basically just, circular motions, you go around and you sponge your hair, right? And what you're doing is abrading the cuticle, which is what we mentioned earlier, and you don't want to abrade your cuticle. And it's going to lead to drier hair, meaning it is going to damage it. And so you don't want to do that unless you have shorter hair. So what I tell men in particular is if you're going to keep your hair at like an inch or maybe an inch and a half, and you're getting it cut regularly anyway, then you're damaging it, but then you're cutting it away. So overall, you may be able to still present your hair in the way that you want it to look. However, if you grow it out and you're still sponging, then you can definitely get that perceived dryness. And with you damaging it, it's actually, and I need to do a class on this, but in actuality, when you damage it and you go out into like a high humid environment, you're actually getting more water in. And so it actually is more moisturized because of the damage is actually going to intake the water even more readily. But that's not what you want because it's going to look and feel dry. So keep that difference in mind. And so am I able to discuss scalp issues? You must be talking about scalp dryness. I have very damaged scalp. Okay, years ago I had chemicals from a relaxer and it seemed that my scalp never healed. Whew. I would say definitely see a dermatologist. That is something that needs medical attention if it's damaged to the point where it never was able to get better from a relaxer treatment. That's unfortunate. In terms of holding in moisture though, and actually getting ready to talk about this right now, so I'll just kind of dive into it. I normally say that hair and scalp that is healthy, meaning that if you don't have any issues, a lot of times we like to oil our scalp or, put some type of ointment on there to keep it from drying out or, making sure that it stays lubricated. I usually don't advocate for that, but in your case, depending upon what's going on with your scalp, that may be something that you need. So yeah, I would see a dermatologist who knows what he or she is doing. So definitely get a referral. I do have dermatologists in the Chicagoland area that I do make recommendations to people for. And so if you're not in Chicagoland, but also keep in mind, if you ever need any help with anything, I do have a team of hair practitioners who have been vetted, who I definitely do refer people to. So that's something that you can reach out to me about as well. And so Taria says, I'm doing all the wrong things. Sponging too. Yeah, that is something that is damaging your hair over time. So glad I'm actually talking about this. And then Taria also says, thank you. For your question, Shanice. Oh, it was Shanice. Okay. Yeah, thank you for asking. But yeah, if you can reach out to me, then I always try to get you in the right hands. Awesome. Okay, so we talked about the different products and practices that will contribute to the dryness that is perceived. And so now let's talk a little bit about products or ingredients that will help with pliability and suppleness. So I just talked about petrolatum. And so that is basically petroleum jelly. And that's good old Vaseline, right? The brand name of Vaseline. And so even though personally, I cannot stand the aesthetics or the tactile feel of Vaseline for my hair because I don't like to feel the greasiness of it, but some people like that. I have family members who absolutely love to just use it as their lotion and to oil their scalp with it or to keep their scalp lubricated. And so that is an option, and it does create a barrier that will hold in moisture. So the aesthetics aren't that good, but it's something that definitely can be used. Then, of course, water. So having water itself, but just know, as I said before, it's going to equilibrate with the environment. And so it's going to eventually dry out or evaporate. So keep that in mind. But also glycerin. We talked a little bit about glycerin last week because there are products out there, more expensive products like hyaluronic acid. That's really expensive, but it's being marketed for, definitely increasing the moisture content, but it can be so much cheaper if you use glycerin. So that is something to keep in mind as well. All right, so these are products and ingredients that help with pliability and suppleness. Now, I do have a disclaimer. And my disclaimer is, even though I gave you some ingredients that are good, we have a tendency to pick up a bottle, turn it over, look at the ingredients, and see if it has the ingredient that you think is advantageous in it. The thing is, and scientists at Procter & Gamble did a couple of seminars on that I listened to, and that's basically that the way that the formula is made. So just because, everybody tries to be, an alchemist and they start mixing and matching different ingredients and they stir it up and think, voila, I got something good. And formulation plays a huge part in how the ingredients are actually going to be effective. So even though I say that there are ingredients that are good, you have to know how to formulate in order to make sure that the ingredient does whatever it is good for. So if it has attributes for, holding in moisture, then you want to make sure that there aren't competing ingredients in there that won't allow it to function optimally. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And in the big businesses, meaning, you know, I always talk about the big three, the Unilevers, the L'Oreals, and the Procter & Gamble's. They have people with years of experience. They have laboratories where they can test their product and make sure that it's behaving in the way that it should. The only thing that I don't see is transparency in them letting us know that their products are actually performing in the way that it should. The other thing that I want to be an advocate for, because when I do see data, a lot of times it's not on Black hair. So since we're talking about Black hair, it would be advantageous for companies to also do the testing on Black hair and to show us the data. So put hashtag show me the data, because that is like my mantra, right? I want you to demand that the data is shown that it is effective in doing whatever claims that they're making, but specifically with our hair. It's very important. So our Black hair matters, and we need to see data on our hair. So Taria says, you have heard reports that Vaseline clog your pores. Is that true? And so not really. So it does more lubricating than it does clogging the pores. When I think of clogging the pores, I think of something that is prohibiting the normal activity. And it's not prohibiting the normal activity. It just, like I said, the aesthetics is unappealing to me, but it really isn't stopping the functionality of what your scalp is supposed to do. So thanks for that question. And then wanted to make sure that I hit all of everything I wanted to say about dry hair. So let me know, are there any questions that you have on dry hair before I move on? Let me know. And so if you have some questions, I will address it, but I am going to move on. So let's talk about things to consider when transitioning from relaxed to natural hair, because there are some people who asked, you know, or concerned about, you know, what they should consider. And so the first thing that I would say is, why are you actually transitioning? And there are a myriad of different answers to that. Me personally, when I transitioned, I have to admit, and I'm not even ashamed to say it, but it was just vanity. I knew that I was going gray, and you can see the patch right here of, you know, my hair that is definitely losing its pigmentation. And I wanted to color it. And I knew, because my hair fibers are very thin in diameter, that I could not withstand relaxer and color on top of it. And so I played around with a demi permanent color, because it's not supposed to be as damaging as permanent color. And I knew that I wanted a permanent color just because I don't go to the salon that much, and I don't believe in me doing my color myself. I'm not that talented. I try to stay in my lane, so I go to a professional. And I recommend those who aren't comfortable with doing their hair or know their hair, I recommend that you go to a professional as well. But that was my reason for wanting to transition from relaxed hair to natural hair. I would tell you in a heartbeat that the amount of time that it took for me to do my hair was a fraction of what it takes now. So that's something you need to consider. You know, are you going to transition and do your hair yourself, or are you going to let somebody else take care of it? Now, I have goals. My goal is to free up my time enough to be able to go and get my hair done. Because if I consider like who I like to go to and going to the city and coming back and all of that, I would have, you know, been able to do it myself. And so I just kind of stay in the comfort of my own home. So one of these days I will be able to sit back and relax and have somebody else do it. But that is something you need to consider, the time that it takes, especially if you're doing it yourself. And thank you, Renee, for coming. Make sure. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know, because I may not be able to see your name, but I will be able to address your question. Okay. The other thing that you have to consider is your curl pattern. So there are a lot of professionals out there who cannot stand like the curl type chart, and I am an advocate for it. And the reason why I'm an advocate for it is depending upon which curl type chart you're talking about, from a scientist perspective, I have to use more quantitative data. So there are measurements that I take of the curl and hair that gives me an idea of what's going on with it, or is one of the variables in hair that I have to consider when I'm doing experiments, right? But there is the curl typing by Andre Walker, or what was inspired by Andre Walker. And so that's something you really need to consider, because the way you grow your hair out when transitioning, the level of ease has to do with your curl pattern. So if you have a tighter curl pattern, you may not be able to continuously wear your hair straight as the relaxer is being grown out of your hair. And the reason being is everybody, knows about the line of demarcation, and that is the area or the boundary between your new growth, which is usually at the root, and then where you actually have the transition into the previously relaxed hair. And so at that line of demarcation, it becomes more difficult to really groom your hair without breaking it off. And so I was able to grow my hair about 4.5 to 5 inches before I did it wasn't so big of a chop, but it was my big chop where I just cut off the relaxed ends. So that's something that you have to consider, because the more curl you have, or the more coily your hair is, the more difficult it would be to grow your hair out long without, I would say, lubricating products so that you minimize the amount of breakage that you get during that transition. The other thing is your density and texture. And what I mean by that is density is how many hair fibers you have within a certain area of your scalp. And then I'm using texture as the textbook definition of how thin or thick your hair fibers are. And so that is extremely important as well. So consider that it will be more difficult if you have a higher density. So if you have that, hair that you have so many fibers where, it's hard to get through, or when you're transitioning, it'll be harder to get through. The other thing is your preferred style, because a lot of people feel that, oh, I'm gonna have this, particular style when I grow it out, and maybe your curl pattern isn't conducive to you having that style, or maybe your density of your hair isn't conducive to it looking the way that you want it to look. So if you have what I'll call, like kind of more sparse hair, then the look that you may be looking for may not be there, or the curl pattern may not be conducive either. And so Maxine says, I was able to grow my client's hair out without having to do the big chop. Yes. Now that is, you said you had your clients. And so I would say that's wonderful, because your clients will love you because you're taking care of their hair. And so that is something I think is advantageous to going to a professional, so you don't have to worry about that. And give me 1 second. I just noticed that I did not plug in my computer, and it's telling me that the battery is low. So I need to make sure that I don't get off of here. I need to tell my daughter to come and give me my charger, because it's not here with me. So I'm going to move on and pray that we continue to stay on. All right. And how people will respond to it. So that was a specific question that someone asked, and that is how people will respond when you actually grow your hair out natural. So I would say that it is something that is really important to consider, especially if you are in a work environment where they don't believe that you have the freedom to wear your hair the way that you want to. And that is like the sole purpose of the Crown Act, so that you don't have anybody discriminating against you just because of the way that you wear your hair. So I hate to say that that's something that you have to consider, but in this day and age, it's definitely something that you need to consider. The other thing is, let me see. Oh, scalp health, extremely important. One second. Can you bring me my charger to my laptop, please? Thank you. And I need it immediately. Thank you. All right. And so that's something that you really need to consider. And it's a shame that, in this day and age, we get discriminated against because of how we wear our hair, but that's the truth. Now, the other thing is your lifestyle factor. And so we talked about this. So the water quality in your area, if you have hard water, growing your hair out natural is going to be very, very difficult because the calcification in the water is what leads to hard water deposits. So it's much more difficult. Can you plug it in for me too? Go around here. Thank you. So if you consider that you have a lifestyle of going and washing your hair in hard water, then it's just going to be way more difficult because that leads to the perceived dryness, meaning that your hair you'll feel the hard water on there and it won't be as pliable. So you need to make sure that the water quality is a softer water if you can help it. Also, if you're out in the sun, if you swim or if you work out, that can also play a role into how difficult it's going to be for you to grow your hair out. So make sure you keep that in mind. And then I already talked about your professional life. How are your colleagues or people who supervise you, how are they going to look at you as you grow your hair out? And yeah, it's a shame, but has to be mentioned. So are there any other questions based on transitioning? All right. So if you have some, just put it in the chat. And then the last thing I want to talk about, well, next to the last thing, is caring for your hair as you age. Now, that means we really need to consider what are the complaints when people are aging in terms of, what they want to address. So the number one thing, unfortunately, is losing hair. A lot of people, as they get older, they are finding that they are either experiencing alopecia or they feel that their hair loss or the thickness of their hair is decreasing over time. And so both of those need to be addressed by a dermatologist and or a hair practitioner, such as a trichologist. Most trichologists, I highly recommend that they partner with a dermatologist so that they can get the care that they need if it is a scarring type of alopecia or if there's something else going on with the scalp. So if you're losing your hair as you age, this is something that I highly recommend. Go see a professional. In addition, I want to talk about styling. So when you style your hair, a lot of people as they age want to continue to have, longer hair. But the truth of the matter is, as you age, your hair becomes thinner. That's something that is documented in the literature time and time again. There's no refuting that. Now, there may be some people who are, older, meaning in their 70s and 80s, and they still have thick hair, but a lot of times their hair was probably a lot thicker, meaning the density of it, when they were younger. And so, all of that in terms of how many follicles we are born with, that is dictated by genetics, right? We can't, unfortunately, get more hair follicles than what we were born with. But one thing that you need to consider is as you're getting older and you want to keep the same hairstyle that you always had, that may be difficult. And so you need to consider the style that you are going to have, because as you get older, you may not be able to have that full look like you once had. The other thing you have to consider that is also documented is slower growth. Yes, when you have hair that is on your head as you grow older, it's growing at a slower rate. And so that's something that you need to consider as well. So having, that haircut and saying, oh, it'll grow back. Yes, it will grow back because your hair is going to continue to grow. It may not grow at the same rate. So consider that. And then last but not least, which is something that, something that I considered, which is graying hair. And so I colored my hair because I needed to hide the gray. And so that's something you need to consider. And as I said before, I highly recommend that you have a practitioner do your hair color, because that's something that is what people go through when they're aging. And so I have someone say that my curl pattern changed and became more coiled as my thyroid changed to underactive. Okay. And so you had hypothyroidism. Yeah, that's something that we are learning more about. Also, you hear a lot of cancer patients before they went into chemotherapy and after they go into chemotherapy that their hair texture can change. So that's something that needs to be considered as well. Go see a professional for sure. And if you have a trichologist, a lot of times they can help you with that and actually go and work with your physician as you are going through what you're going through health-wise. And so Imani says, yes, the answer is yes. So I have someone asking me if my cat came in when I got the cord. And that is true. So I had to deter her from doing some things. All right. Now, the other thing, caring for your hair as you age, and that is, just finding a great stylist, because your hair is definitely going to change. So it's extremely important that you have a stylist help you with the transition as you get older, because there are some things that are going to happen naturally. And so having a great stylist and a trichologist would definitely be beneficial. Thanks for laughing about things that just happen in life. Battery going low, and then the other cat got in. But anyway, now I'm on my last topic, if there aren't any more questions. And that is, what's new in the world of hair, right? And so my answer is there is not a lot of things that are new, unfortunately. The most that I can say is I have a lot of peers and I have a lot of hair practitioners who are interested in doing something about that. So while there isn't a lot of things that are new, there are a lot of things that are like asymptotal, meaning that we don't have proof, but we have some things that are being observed that we can actually start moving towards getting data for. And so I noticed that Nadia was on earlier. I absolutely love Nadia as a hair practitioner, because she's not only willing to, really understand what's going on, but she's also willing to allow us to get more information based on some things that she's observing. So being aware that, okay, based on your experience, you're noticing things as a practitioner, or if you're noticing things as a consumer, just having a platform or some type of way that you can talk about it to others. So like researchers such as myself, so that we can actually do a controlled study to really understand what is going on. Because right now there isn't a lot of things that are new. And because this platform is based on, having data and things that are based on research, I don't have a lot to report because there aren't a lot of things going on, particularly with Black hair. So that's something that's going to change next month. And I will actually have an announcement about that a little later. But more research is needed. We have so many things that we need to learn. So when I saw the question in terms of wanting to know what's new, I just hate to report that there isn't enough new stuff going on. And so if you would like to be a part of that, always reach out and let me know. Hello, Christine. You said you needed to hear some of this. Awesome. I'm glad you're getting some benefit out of it. Also, I want to talk about research. Oh, but when I was talking about Nadia, there are practitioners such as Nadia who have a particular protocol that she uses. And so she's seeing great results, but we need to get some data behind it. So when I was mentioning earlier that it was very important for us to consider the data and to ask manufacturers, whether or not they're doing research on our hair types. And I'm not talking about what is often called, mulatto hair, and I don't mean to be offensive, but that is a term that's used in our industry that will describe Black hair. And there are plenty of people who have coily hair, which is considered the 4C hair by the Andre Walker, his identification of the curl. There are plenty people who have 4C hair, which will argue up and down, and I would be one of them, that mulatto hair is not going to be representative of my hair type. So if you're talking about, the hair is going to make the hair more manageable, or the product is going to make the hair more manageable, saying that you use mulatto hair in your studies is not going to satisfy someone like me. So we have to demand that the hair care companies do that, and they represent us all of the way. Because if they're going to be selling to our demographic, they need to really be doing research on it as well. All right, so if there aren't any other questions, I know that this was a crazy live. My husband is going to have a fit because the cat actually bit his avocado plant, or tree, I should say. This is not going to be good, but it was a fun live nevertheless. So thank you for your patience, and really appreciate you joining me. And always know that our Black hair matters. And as always, take care and love your hair. Bye-bye.